Guten Tag, IB Econ. We have a new video today. It's the bee's knees by the big cheese himself, Mr. Linegar. Let's make history today as we jaw over the first part of our Unit 2 video. This is covering concepts 1 through 6. But first, let's do our daily punishment. Did you hear about the kidnapping? He woke up. All right, like I said, we're going over Unit 2, concepts 1 through 6. We're going to be starting with supply and demand. So first, let's define what markets are. Markets are where buyers and sellers come together to carry out an economic transaction. There are different types of markets: product markets, labor markets. We have a graph for that. Financial markets, stock markets. We're going to start off with talking about demand. Demand is the quantity of good or service that consumers are willing and able to purchase at a given price at a given time period. You have to be willing and able to do it. They must have the financial means to buy things. Otherwise, they are not on the line. The law of demand is that as the price of a product falls, the quantity demanded of the product will usually increase. Ceteris paribus. So we're not talking about non-price determinants. This is ceteris paribus, all things being equal. There's different ways that demand curves can change. You can have any change in the price or product simply moves along the demand curve. This is if there's a change in quantity demand. So this is just a change in price. This does not cause a whole new line. This is just a movement on the line because the price has changed. Change in quantity demand. Bam, right here. Then we have a change in demand. This is when there's a non-price determinant that has caused a shift in demand. For example, a change in income. Like that. So we're going to talk about the 5 demand shifters that cause demand to shift. Numero uno, income. This is the amount of people's that they have of their income. It's an important factor that influences the demand for a good or service. The effect of the demand curve will depend on the type of good that they want to buy, whether it's a normal good or inferior good. Normal goods are goods that as your income rise, you'll demand more of it. Like a car, like an iPad. Inferior goods are goods that as people's income decreases, people will want more of the good, like ramen noodles, spam, stuff like that. Number 2, related goods. This is both complements and substitutes. These goods affect each other. Complementary goods, let's say the price of hamburgers goes down, the demand of French fries will shift to the right, it will increase because people buy these things together. They're complementary. Substitutes are things that you'll get in lieu of the other thing. So like soy milk and almond milk. If the price of soy milk increases, the demand for almond milk will increase. Ceteris paribus. Number 3 are taste and preferences, fads. When goods become more or less popular, out of fashion, if some kind of thing happens to them, promotional campaigns, demands will be affected. You'll have a rightward or a leftward shift. Number 4 is number of consumers. When there's an increase or decrease in the number of consumers, that will cause a shift in demand. And number 5 is future expectations. If you think the price of a good is going to get higher in the future, you'll demand more now to avoid paying more in the future. We also have future economy. If you think the economy is going to continue to do well, then the demand for a product will increase. If I think the economy is going to do well, I'm going to keep my job, my demand for a new house will increase. Here are the demand shifters right here. Let's go to supply, guys. Supply is the willingness and ability of a producer to produce a quantity of good at a certain price given a certain time period. You have to be willing and able. And the law of supply is as the price of a product rises, the quantity supplied of the product will usually increase. Ceteris paribus. If I could charge more for something, I'll be willing to produce more. Demand curve is going to be downward sloping. Supply curve is going to be upward sloping. And same thing right here. A change in quantity supplied is just a movement on the line. It's just a change in price. And a change in supply is going to be a non-price determinant, like cost of production, input cost. So we have change in quantity supply, which is just a change in price. And change in supply, which is a shift, which is a non-price determinant, like input cost. So let's talk about the supply shifters. Number one, input cost or cost of production. Changes in the cost of production for factors of production of a good or service that firms produce is very important. That will influence supply. So if it could be if a product costs more, if if a resource to make a product is cheaper, that will increase supply. If wages go up, that could cause a decrease in supply because that's labor. The example right here is they have the price of flour or wheat for pizza. Number 2 is technology. Improvement in a firm's or technology will increase supply. If there's less technology, it could decrease it. Number 3 is number of firms and sellers. If you have more firms and sellers, you're going to have an increase in supply. Less firms and sellers, decrease. Next one is future expectations. If a producer thinks the price will go up in the future, they're going to supply less now, and they're going to wait until the prices go up. So it's the opposite of the demand. For future economy, if producers expect the economy to do well, they will produce more. So that's the same kind of thing as demand. Next one is related goods. When you have joint supply is when that 2 or more goods are derived from the same product. So from wheat, you get wheat bread, and the stems of the wheat is hay. It always comes with it. So if the price of wheat bread goes down, there's going to be an increase in supply of hay. And the next one is competitive supply. This is when 2 goods use similar resources and processes, similar capital. So like wheat bread and white bread. If the price of wheat bread goes down, the supply of white bread will go down. And the last one is government intervention. Government intervention does affect the micro market. Taxes would cause a decrease in supply. Subsidies would cause an increase in supply. And more government regulation would cause a decrease in supply. Less government regulation, increase in supply. Here we have the shifters right here. Thing you should know is that weather also does cause a shift. There are other things that also cause a shift. They usually fall in here. But weather could fall under cost of production. We're next going to talk about equilibrium. Equilibrium is the interdependence between consumers and producers. It's illustrated when the demand and supply line intersect. The definition is a state of rest, self-perpetuating, the absence of any outside disturbance. The goal of all economic markets are to be in equilibrium. If you see right here, we have the equilibrium graph. Demand have intersect supply at PE and QE. If the lines do not intersect, you can also have excess supply or excess demand, shortages and surpluses, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. We do have shifts from equilibrium. This right here is a demand shift, an increase in demand, maybe like a change in consumer preference. When that happens, the price will go up and the quantity will go up. Let's talk about the role of price mechanism. Price mechanisms will move a market to equilibrium and allocate resources effectively, allocative efficiency. This works because we assume that producers and consumers are rational and wish to maximize their profits. So if they're charging too much and people are not buying the product, they'll lower the product. If they're charging too little and they have a shortage, they will raise the price. No central agency tells producers what to produce or how much to charge. It's the price that drives the change. It's the whole idea of the invisible hand. Some of the functions of the price mechanism is to signal information to consumers and producers, to ration scarce resources, that's really what this is all about, and to give incentives to consumers and producers. So, if prices are rising due to an increase in demand for a product, there's a signal to suppliers to expand their production in order to meet the higher level of demand. If there's a surplus in the market, the price mechanism eliminates the excess supply by adjusting the market price downwards. During an economic recession, when demand is lower, supply contracts as producers reduce output. These are all examples of signaling and incentive functions of the price mechanism. Our whole goal is to get to equilibrium at market efficiency. When you do this, there is going to be a consumer surplus and a producer surplus. The consumer surplus is all the extra gain of utility consumers get from paying at a price that is lower than which they were prepared to pay. So like right here, some producers would have been willing to pay all the way from A to B. So this triangle right here is a consumer surplus. Likewise, some producers would have been willing to charge from B to D. They would have been willing to charge less. So this right here is the producer surplus. It's the excess of actual earnings that a producer makes from a given quantity of output, of the output amount that the producer will be prepared to accept for the output. Here's another picture of the consumer and producer surplus. The consumer surplus and producer surplus equals the community or social surplus. Like I said here, when a market is in equilibrium, there are no external influences and no external effects. It is said to be socially efficient or in a state of allocative efficiency. Resources are allocated in the most efficient way for society's point of view. Productive efficiency is producing the maximum amount of output within a given level of input. And we talked about the community surplus. That is the sum of the consumer and producer surplus. Just continuing on, we're going to be talking about this more when we get to externalities, but the marginal social cost is when we assume the cost of the industry are equal to the cost to society. It's the extra cost incurred by society from the production of one extra unit or good. The marginal social benefit is the benefits in the market that are equivalent to the benefits of society. We're assuming the MPB and the MSB are the same. And it's marginal, so that means the extra benefit enjoyed by society from the consumption of good from an extra unit of a good. We are now going to go to elasticity of demand. There is a good amount of math in this part of the unit. It's not super hard. That we're going to be talking about two math formulas for elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand. Elasticity is a measurement of how much something changes the demand when there's a change in one of the determinants. So if there's a change in price, how responsive will demand be to a change in quantity? How much will quantity be impacted by that? It measures how much the demand for a product changes when there's a change in one of the factors that determine demand. So let's first talk about PED, price elasticity of demand. It's a measurement of how much the quantity demanded of a product changes when there's a change in the price of a product. The way you find the answer for this, the formula is it's the percentage change in quantity divided by the percentage change in price. If the number is less than 1, it is inelastic. If it is greater than 1, it's elastic. These are all absolute values, so we don't have negative numbers. Right here, there's a little math formula for you to do, and this would be elastic. Sometimes we don't know the percentage change in quantity or demand or price, so we have to do this formula right here. It's new minus old divided by old times 100. This will give us a percentage change in which we could then plug into the previous formula. And here's the previous formula. Percentage change in quantity divided by percentage change in price. General characteristics about elastic demand for PED. There's many substitutes. A lot of times they're luxury goods. They take up a large portion of your income. They're non-addictive. You have plenty of time to decide. They're not urgent. Examples: luxury vehicles, vacation, brand name clothing, entertainment tickets, general categories. They have a greater coefficient, greater than 1. And if a change in price happens for elastic, it's going to cause a greater change in quantity. For inelastic, there's few close substitutes, high degree of necessity, gasoline, insulin, penicillin, small portions of your income, addictive, cigarettes. It's required now rather than later, like heart surgery. Examples: gasoline, medicine, basic groceries, utilities, public transportation, agricultural commodities. And these have a coefficient less than 1. So there might be a change in price, but it's going to cause a less change in quantity. So if you look right here, for elastic, it looks flatter, and there's a 10% change in price, but since it's elastic, it's going to cause a 14% decrease in quantity. For inelastic, it looks more straight, and a 10% change in price will only cause a 7% change in quantity. This is a relatively elastic diagram. Inelastic. This was called unitary elastic. It's exactly 1. This is perfectly inelastic. It is 0. Perfectly inelastic, it's 0. And this is perfectly elastic. It is the infinite number. And here's a summation of them right here. So some of the determinants of the price elasticity of demand are the number and closeness of substitutes. If there's more substitutes, it'll be elastic. The necessity of the product. If it's more necessity, then it's going to be inelastic. And the time period considered. If it's something you need right now, if it's short term, it's inelastic. If it's something you could wait to get, it's going to be more elastic. There are other ways we can calculate PED, and we could do the total revenue test. Total revenue is price times quantity. You do need to know that. And what can happen is you could just multiply price times quantity from the old number and the new number. And if there's an increase or decrease, it'll tell us what it is. So let's go over this. So let's do some examples. Let's say we have medicine. If it's inelastic, medicine is inelastic, the price of it goes up. The total revenue will increase because there's going to be less change in quantity. For inelastic goods, the total revenue always increases because the quantity doesn't change by that much. If there's a decrease in price, the decrease in total revenue will decrease. For elastic goods, let's say like iPhones, if there's an increase in price, the total revenue will decrease because there'll be a greater decrease in quantity. And if there's a decrease in price, the total revenue will increase. And then we have unit elastic, which would be no change. Just going back from what we just said, if the government is looking at taxing a good for consumers, if they're looking to do a consumer tax, would you rather do inelastic or elastic taxes? You will make more revenue, just going back from here, by doing taxing inelastic products. But a lot of times these taxes are regressive and they hurt poorer people more. So taxes will have an impact on quantity demand. A tax impact on an elastic good has a larger impact than imposed on inelastic good. Government will tend to place taxes on items that are relatively inelastic and will not negatively affect the economy. This will make more revenue. A tax on an elastic good can have greater effects, though. Next, we're going to talk about income elasticity of demand, YED. This measures how much the demand for a product changes when there's a change in the consumer's income. The formula is going to look very similar. It's the total change in quantity demanded of the product, the percentage change, divided by the percentage change in income of a person. And there's an example right here with a change in income and a change in quantity demanded. And we get the YED. The YED is a little bit more complicated, but it's not really bad. If the YED is positive, it's a normal good. If it's negative, it is an inferior good. If it's between 0 and 1, it's inelastic, and it's called a necessity good, like bread. If it's above 1, it's a superior or a luxury good. It's elastic. And things would be like going on a holiday trip abroad. The one thing you should notice about the angle curve is you do put the income on the y-axis and the quantity on the x-axis. If it's a normal good, if it's greater than 0, it is going to be upward sloping. Remember, there's two different types of normal goods, necessity and luxury. If it's inferior good, you can have negative numbers here. It's less than 0, so it's a negative number, and it's going to be downward sloping. If it's inelastic, if it's a necessity good, it's going to be more like vertical, upward sloping. It's inelastic. It's going to be more horizontal if it's a luxury good. For perfectly income inelastic necessity good, it's going to be a straight vertical line. Here, there's no classification. This is just a proportionate change. And here's what YED means if you need a little key right here for all the goods. Really, the three big ones to know are inferior, necessity, and luxury. The last thing we're going to talk about is PES. Price elasticity of supply is a measurement of how much the supply of a product changes when there's a change in the price of the product. The formula is percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price. And just the same thing for PED, PES, and YED. If you don't have the percentage change, you need to do the formula new minus old divided by old times 100. Here are some characteristics of PES for inelastic. It takes a long period of time. It's hard to move the factors of production. There's little spare capacity, little ability to store stocks. It's hard to obtain more resources. It's a necessity. Some examples are agricultural products like grain and potatoes, nuclear power, parking spaces, rare paintings, fossils, antiques, historical documents, stadium tickets, groceries, prescription drugs, electricity, oil production. And this has a PES between 0 and 1. For elastic PES, it's over a short period of time to produce. It's easy to move the factors of production, easy to produce. You have a large spare capacity, so you can make more. You can store the stocks or resources needed to make it. It's easy to get more resources. It's not usually too expensive. The input costs are not too expensive. A lot of times luxury goods are elastic for supply, but not always. Some examples are toothpicks, gold coins, jewelries, luxury items, luxury cars, designer fashion, hotel rooms, and tourist destinations. And the PES here would be greater than 1. So let's look at some PES graphs. This first right here is greater than 1. This is elastic. The next one right here is perfectly inelastic. You can see it's more vertical. This is price inelastic supply. This would be a PES of 0. It's just a vertical line. This is a unitary elastic. It's any curve that passes through 0, 0. And the PES is 1. And perfectly elastic supply is right here. It's a change in price that leads to an equal change in the quantity supplied. Producers are proportionally sensitive to price changes. Let's talk about some of the determinants of PES. How much the cost rise as output is increased. The existence of unused capacity. If firms have higher unused capacity, then the item will be more likely elastic. If firms have little room to store items, then it's going to be more inelastic. The mobility of the factors of production. The time period considered. The longer it takes to make something, the more elastic the supply line will be. What that means is this. That passage is saying that if you have more of, if a producer has more time to make it, if they have more time available, then it's going to be more elastic. But if they have to do it immediately, it's going to be more inelastic. As far as just production time, if it takes a producer a long time to make something, it's going to be more inelastic, like agricultural products. But if they can make it really quickly, like an assembly line, it's going to be more elastic. The last thing is the ability to store stocks. Here are the graphs right here. Here's the summation. And we are done. We have finished about the first half of microeconomics. That is all I have for you today, kiddos. Until next time, deuces. Deuces, yeah.